Welcome to Transformational Leadership, the podcast for leaders building high-performance organizations and teams. In every episode, you will hear from executives and transformation experts who've led with vision, executed under pressure, and delivered real, scalable, and impactful results. You'll hear practical insights and leadership stories from executives who've driven change, delivering transformation, and consistently winning in highly complex environments. No fluff, just frameworks, lessons, and stories from the front lines of leadership. If you're serious about building competitive impact through people, you're in the right place. Here is your host, Jeff Harnois.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Transformational Leadership Podcast. My next guest today is Richard Finger, Vice President, Human Resources at Broadmead Inc., a continuing care retirement community in Maryland. Before that, though, Richard led his former company, LifeBridge Health, to win the James W. Rouse Diversity Award. And before that, he led a global HR transformation at Bristol-Myers Squibb. During that time, Richard also led a spinoff of Mead Johnson from Bristol-Myers Squibb while building the new business on a global level. On the side, Richard teaches SHRM certification courses for HR professionals. Richard, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Yeah.
You were part of Bristol-Myers Squibb, Richard, when their flagship product, the blood thinner drug called Plavix, was about 7 years out from coming off patent protection. Mm-hmm. That particular event led to multiple transformation initiatives, which on this particular show, when we talk about transformations, you've got a truckload of them to talk about. And we're going to jump into some of those today. But that included things like offloading certain businesses, creating some spinoffs, and then also reinventing the organization that was going to remain post-patent removal. Let's jump right into the Bristol-Myers Squibb. Think of this as maybe the triggering event. Tell us a little bit about Plavix and what was happening in the market.
Sure. So at the time, Plavix was a multi-million-dollar selling pharmaceutical. It was the flagship prescribed drug of Bristol-Myers Squibb at the time. And 7 years before it was going off patent, the organization was taking all the necessary steps to reinvent itself and continue investing in the very rich pipeline that they had going at the time. And at the time when Plavix, when all this was happening, the organization was about 44,000 employees globally. Mm-hmm. And my role at the time, I was an HR associate director of HR in the United States, and I was supporting global financial shared services and some of the information management teams that were directly impacted by this change, right? So the organization was thinking about a number of ways to continue focusing on the core value or the value chain that Bristol-Myers Squibb provided, right, which are developing and selling pharmaceuticals in, I think it was 6 or 7 disease areas. And so that was the business plan. That was the business strategy. And how are they going to get there? So how they got there was looking at some of their portfolio of organizations that had been part of the Bristol-Myers Squibb family. So I remember it started with this over-the-counter piece of the business. People might remember Excedrin, right? Mm-hmm. Excedrin back in the, I would say, mid-early 2000s was a Bristol-Myers Squibb drug and sold that piece to Bayer. Mm-hmm. And at that time, there were some employees that were part of my client group that were now going to become Bayer employees, mm-hmm. right? And then there was this next step where they were looking at their medical device company, Convatec, and a medical imaging company. And those were sold to a different buyer. Then the next set of employees that were Bristol-Myers employees, they were being sent over to be employees of those new ventures. And then there was Mead Johnson Nutrition, which was an infant nutrition company, global organization that I would say about 5,000 or so global employees. And they never did find the right buyer for that business. So 2009, February of 2009, Mead Johnson Nutrition decides to become independent, go off on their own. They were publicly traded stock on the New York Stock Exchange. So they were not only selling off businesses and making business decisions in that regard, they were also looking inwardly at what are some other ways that we could continue to reinvest in the pipeline. And a project called Productivity Transformation, which was born, and that entailed saving $500 million.
Mm-hmm.
So what did that mean, you might ask? That meant the bad word at the time was outsourcing, and we were in the thick of it. We were looking at some of the functionalities in IT and in finance, saying these are not core services of Bristol-Myers Squibb, but they are someone else's core services. And maybe there's a way to find a partner that can do those things really well and more efficiently and more cost efficiently for us. So again, being in my role as the HR person for a lot of the services that were being considered, I was in the thick of all of that work.
Yeah, that's incredible, Richard. Again, we have really good conversations about transformation on this particular podcast. And this transformation, or this story that you're telling in particular, is very large scale and complex and sounds very matrixed in terms of the transformations that were at hand. It involved different buying entities. It involved decision making about to sell or to hold businesses. It involved decisions about how to create new vision going forward. At the beginning, I'm interested, Richard, at the beginning, how were you thinking about all of the change that was coming up?
Great question. It was very overwhelming, right? It was at the time when all of these announcements were being made, and you were hearing very commonly, Bristol-Myers Squibb wants to become this nimble, agile biopharmaceutical company, and knew that big things were going to happen to realize that eventuality. So it was exciting to be part of all that. Of course, there was a level of excitement, but there was also a lot of concern. This was big transformational projects of which I had very little experience in doing this work at the time. So it was really leveraging other people's knowledge and following the lead. And thankfully, we had some really great third-party project management partners that helped shepherd this through. So I was learning as I went and soaking it up, because we ended up doing 4 different outsourcing deals, and every one of them were so different. So you learn from one to apply to the other, to the next. And by the time I remember we were done, they used to say, you want to do a global outsourcing, talk to that guy. Because he knows what he's doing. And really, depending on what it was we were outsourcing, it was looking very different in different parts of the world, where some people were becoming part of that new partner organization. Some people were losing their jobs, quite honestly. And then we were working on, so what does the retained organization look like? Work.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of juggling. And I think one of the things that makes this story interesting to me is not having a background in transformation or change management and having to figure it out as you go is incredible
Yeah.
because, again, just based on size, scope, scale, and the matrixed element of this complexity, that's a lot. It's a lot to juggle and it's a lot to try and figure out as you go. One of the things that you said that was interesting to me that sort of rang my bell a little bit is
Mhm.
you could start developing a spin-off model or an offloading model, but in fact, they were all different. The goals were the same, right? Get this asset or these assets transferred to a new owner.
Yeah.
That's relatively easy to understand. But I'm guessing the complexity in each of the deals was significantly different. And what I think I heard you say is you developed a model that would incorporate the unknown variables. I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I would say that we always talked about the playbook, right? We wanted to develop the playbook so that when you're entering into due diligence with a new partner, you knew what questions to ask. You
Yeah.
knew, right? You knew how to ask the right questions. And what was really important to us was being a pharmaceutical company was around making sure that we were engaging with organizations that had similar cultures and
Okay.
right. And
And Richard, sorry for the interruption. Was
yeah,
that part of the, maybe let me ask this a little differently. How
yeah,
significant of a component of that went into the decision of who the organization would sell to?
yeah, it was a huge part of that. So
It was. That's interesting.
for every one of these deals, when we were going through that RFP process, the final two, three, or four would come to Bristol-Myers Squibb and do a presentation for us and where we were learning. They made their culture part of what we do. And
Hmm.
I do remember one of those partnerships was with Accenture. And
Mhm.
part with that deal, there were some folks in the US that were about to transition to be considered Accenture employees. And I remember partnering with the lead on their project, meeting with the Bristol employees and having a side by side view of, look, this is these are the values and behaviors that are important at Bristol. And look how they mirror and match what's happening at Accenture.
Mm.
So every one of those, it was very important. And I think when you're talking about a pharmaceutical company, reputation matters. So
Yeah.
you want to partner with globally recognized, very highly reputable organizations. So you're selling pharmaceuticals, people are ingesting what you make, and it's not the mission statement of Bristol-Myers Squibb was to extend and enhance human life. And I think we
Mm.
looked for partners that really understood that.
I would. That's interesting because it's actually the question that's on my mind, which is what were some of the key cultural elements that Bristol-Myers Squibb was trying to protect and preserve through these transformations, and extending life was one of them. What were some of the others, if you remember?
Yeah, I do remember our core BMS behaviors, things around leading strategically and communicating directly,
Mhm.
collaboration, definitely relationship building. So it was really the Bristol Myers Squibb behaviors were really a framework that we used to establish what if you're going to come and work here, you're going to have to show and demonstrate how you're it was part of our performance review, right? You had to show how you were living out and carrying out these behaviors every day. And it was so important that our reviews were 50-50. It was 50% based on what did you do, but how you did it was definitely equally as important.
Wow, I love to hear that. Often one of the key pieces of consulting advice that we give a lot of our clients who are in transformation is exactly that. Align your compensation model with your goals and your values together. And
Right.
when you do that, you get fantastic results. And when you don't, it is a much steeper hill to climb.
I always say you are what you allow.
You are what you allow, and you become what you incent, maybe.
Yes, exactly
Yeah.
right. Exactly right. The other piece of this that's also interesting. So I was dealing with primarily two very different personalities when it came to some of this outsourcing work, with one key leader on the IT side who was more aggressive in terms of her approach, and I would say a little less cautious. And then on the finance side, I was dealing with a leader there who was very cautious and wanted to build in fail safe. If we pull the switch on day one and it's not working, what do we do? And so you're managing personalities at the
Yeah. This is my head's exploding on that statement alone. That's exactly right. I tell people this all the time. You can have the best transformation vision in mind.
Yeah.
You can have the best transformation plan involved. You can have all of your contingencies identified and dealt with. You can have all of your risk identified and mitigated. But if you don't manage the people side of the initiative, which is one, understanding who they are, how they need to be communicated with, and how they need to be motivated, and how they need to be aligned.
Mhm.
If you don't understand that and get everyone, or at least the majority of people heading in the right direction, it doesn't matter how good your plan is. It doesn't matter how good your idea is. It's not going to succeed.
Yeah. One of
Sounds
the
sounds like you were dealing with a bit of that yourself successfully.
I was, and I was very fortunate that I always say about my career, I was spoiled very early in my career, and that I worked with the most phenomenal leaders, really, at Bristol-Myers Squibb that I ever worked with. And our CIO at the time, a woman named Susan O'Day, used to say, the number one business process we have is performance management. And she was one of those people she was a woman who didn't say a whole lot, but when she did, everyone listened. That E.F. Hutton effect, right?
Love
And
that.
so now all of her direct reports, who were the people I was providing HR services to, a lot of them took that lead, and we all took it very seriously.
Yeah.
And so we also knew not only the work we were doing, we're extending and enhancing human life, but we also knew we were dealing with people that potentially were going to lose jobs or something might happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how we went about that. And we were so transparent in all of the steps that we were taking that people knew 8 months in advance before positions were being eliminated, and appreciated the transparency and knew I'd rather know what's going on than be told 2 weeks before that I'm losing my job. So
this is excellent, Richard. Richard, this is excellent. I want to spend a little bit of time here.
Yeah.
It is phenomenal to me that phenomenal and then unreasonably challenging to know that you are about to enter into a high state of fluidity and uncertainty. So that's the organizational dynamic. And still getting people to step up and lean in and support the initiative, even with the uncertainty of their own continued or ongoing employment going forward.
Correct.
How did you approach that dynamic?
So carefully. So first of all, we were fortunate in that you had a lot of people there that were so dedicated to the work that they were doing. And for them, we all had a sense that why we were there was bigger than us, right? It was about extending and enhancing human life. It doesn't get any more, any more serious than that.
And meaningful, I think, Richard.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that you had, I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of people had a lot of vested interest, even though they were the ones who weren't going to continue. The work was going to be continued, and it was seeing this bigger picture. That and sometimes financial incentives help.
Sure.
Bristol-Myers Squibb probably had a very generous, very extremely generous severance policy in
Hmm.
pharmaceuticals. It was probably par for the course at the time. I think we had a really great way of looking at the folks that were impacted and their criticality to success or failure of the initiative. And if we found that somebody met that criteria, that they know this person needs to stay in order for that knowledge transfer to occur, we're going to make sure we do what it takes to keep them for that critical period of time. So there were
Hmm.
retention bonuses that were given, but also that overall good nature of people wanting to move forward and help people live longer lives. So both of those things really helped. And I think the care of the partner that we were knowledge transferring with, I remember when folks were coming in from other parts of the world for that knowledge transfer to actually occur. You're meeting the person who ultimately is going to be doing your job and being asked to engage, right, with that person. But one of the provisions of severance was remaining an employee in good standing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that behooved them to want to participate.
What's also occurring to me in sort of real time here, Richard, is understanding I'm going to pull this from the previous part of our conversation, understanding the critical component, the critical success factor
Mm-hmm.
of finding partners whose values aligned in advance and making that
Yes.
part of the decision making process.
Mm-hmm.
Because as those people are coming in and taking over for the people that are transitioning, I'm certain that if those values weren't present, the
Mm-hmm.
transitioning team probably one wouldn't have been as successful as they were, and probably it could have even created resentment
Yeah.
and potentially even sabotage to the initiative. But the fact that the cultural alignment was part of the decision making
Yeah.
process probably led to the successful outcome.
Yeah.
It's brilliant when I think about it, honestly. It's
Well,
brilliant to have that much foresight and forethought into the process through the outcome.
yeah. One of the innovations, right, that uh, was born out of all of this work was, it's coming back to me now like it was yesterday, was
Uh-huh.
this concept of infused personnel, we called them, right?
Hmm.
So imagine in some parts of the world, we were outsourcing work to Accenture and to Manila for this piece of work. And what we ended up doing was they would hire Bristol-Myers Squibb employees and move them to Manila. So they're being paid by Accenture, but they're working on the Bristol-Myers Squibb account. And we
Okay.
started to really think about career succession planning and career pathing and saying maybe somebody working 2 or 3 years in another organization still on our account getting a different experience, it doesn't mean that they get ruled out for future positions at Bristol-Myers Squibb, and trying to just be more creative in terms of how we were looking at talent management too,
Huh.
with our partners saying, why are we being so parochial about resources?
Mhm.
There's something bigger to look at here.
Do I understand this right? Because my brain is probably jumping ahead.
Sure.
Do I understand this that the people who were acquired in these acquisitions that transferred were not only considered eligible for rehire, but were given some sort of priority?
I don't know that they were given a priority, but I would say that they were considered as part of the conversation when we're thinking about succession
Hmm.
planning for future roles. Who are the
Just
people?
automatically in the
Wait a
conversation.
minute, that person still does exist. They don't work here, but we know who they are. We know what they're capable of. And we would be remiss if we erased their name from the
Yeah.
possibility of a return.
Wow. Again,
Yeah,
brilliant
yeah,
strategy. And
yeah.
there's so much wisdom and foresight into creating that. I'm assuming there must have been some contractual language with Accenture and the buyers that was an option. Yeah.
The relationship was pretty strong, right? So there was contractual language in there about do not recruit. But obviously, I think where it made business sense and everyone, it was that when
Yeah.
we would be foolish not to let some contract language get in the way of doing something that's good for everybody
Yeah.
involved,
Doing the right thing.
right? Yeah,
I
and
love
again,
that.
it goes back
Wow.
to the core values, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. This is phenomenal. When one of the questions that's rattling around in my head, Richard, is you entered into all of this transformation. And again, it wasn't even on a small scale.
Mhm.
And it wasn't on a low complexity scale either. It was world-class global level change.
Yeah.
And you didn't have any formal training in this space. When you look back on that experience in its totality, how has it transformed you?
I learned a lot about myself, and I think it transformed me in understanding how the resourceful, I always say I never knew how resourceful or resilient I
Yeah.
was,
Amen
right?
to both of those.
Yeah. And so it gave me confidence to know that no matter what you're in a stressful Billie Jean King Pressure is a Privilege book, my favorite.
Mhm.
But looking at it from a different way, saying, first of all, this is a gift. This pressure is a gift. And I'd rather have the challenge than no challenge. And then, wait a minute, I went through some pretty heavy, complex situations in my career. I could do this again, right?
Mhm.
I was tested. And so I think from a confidence boosting, right? Sure, it's transformed me in that
Yeah.
way. You feel better about the HR skills and knowledge that you can get a SHRM certification and have a master's degree and they teach you wonderful things. But actually that experience, the value of the experiential learning is really priceless.
Yeah. Yeah. The for whatever reason, what's coming to mind is the difference between boot camp, where you're learning how to be a soldier, and then getting in a war,
Yeah,
and getting in a fight, and having to fight for your life. Seems very similar to me. As you said, you can get certifications, you can get an education, but until you're out on the front line,
right.
you really don't. One of my favorite things to work on is you really don't even know what you're capable of. Let's go explore that a little bit. Let's go
Correct.
figure out. Here's the truth, and this is the world according to Jeff. People, I think, are way more capable than they give themselves credit for, and they just haven't been in a situation where they've been required to stretch to those limits.
Yeah.
And a lot of our programs are really designed to help people see competency, skill set, improving things like confidence and decision making and relationship building, all of that at higher levels than you even thought were possible previously. That's the work that feeds our soul. So it sounds like you were in a very similar situation looking back. So besides confidence, which is significant,
Yeah.
were there any strategies or tools or approaches that came from that through the fire kind of experience that you're still using today?
Yes. So,
Principles,
yes.
strategies, whatever.
I would say a methodology on
Okay.
stakeholder engagement, right? Thinking about, we know that time is a commodity and that stakeholder engagement you have to take great care to bring people along with you. but really understanding. So this model was called AUBO, right? Do I need you to be aware? Do I need you to understand? Do I need you to buy in? Or do you need you to
Mm.
own whatever this change, this initiative that was happening?
Mm-hmm.
And then you list your stakeholder, whether they're groups or people, and put them through this filter. And it really helps you from a time management perspective know I need to spend this percentage of time with this group and maybe this percentage of time with this other group, which is less
Mm-hmm.
critical. Who's in the critical path of getting this through?
Mm-hmm.
And just that whole, we talk about in one of the Sherham competencies is leadership and navigation. And I always tell my class, it's the navigation piece that's the real challenge, right? No one draws you a roadmap when you first join an organization to say, here's how you get things done. Here are
Yeah.
the people here are the people of influence that you need to get on your side. So you're figuring all this out in real time. And I think that once you realize the way how you navigate through the organization to get to your end game, it's very powerful. It's a powerful tool, and I've used it very often in my career.
Mm.
Yes.
Where did that come from?
So I'm going to try to remember. It was probably a third-party consultant that came in at some point and was trying to help us with our journey of stakeholder communications and stakeholder engagement. And so it was something that kind of stuck with me because it was so simple. I always believe it doesn't have to be overly engineered or complicated. I'll
Yeah.
take the Toyota over a Mercedes-Benz if it works.
I love that. What was the acronym again?
AUB
Uh-huh.
as in boy, O.
Yep.
AUBO.
AUBO.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not coming up.
No. The other one, and maybe it was a homegrown, and the other one at Bristol that I definitely remember was DAI, decision maker, advisor, or informed. So we were all overloaded with meeting invites, and it was articulating in a meeting invite why you were there. Do I need you to help? Do I need a decision from you? Do I need advice from you? Do I need to
Yeah.
inform you of something? And it really made you think about who you were inviting, why you were inviting them,
Yeah.
instead of inviting everyone. And then you're able to go back to AUBO and say, okay, marry those two things, and they become even more impactful.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. It reminds me of something called RACI.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very similar to that. But I think RACI has a couple of blind spots. Yeah, a couple of blind spots in terms of ownership and accountability, even though the A in RACI is accountable. That's
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
What else besides confidence and now some of the methodologies, anything else transform you through those experiences? Are there any tools, strategies, approaches, thought spaces, mind shifts that have occurred for you as a result of that experience, which sounds
Yeah.
phenomenal on one hand and crazy on another?
I think it's one thing that I try to understand is that the clarity of where are we trying to go, right? I feel like
Aha.
the more we can articulate, I'll take my own organization right now, which is going through a growth period, a growth phase, and quite an aggressive one. And I think my CEO is doing a terrific job of providing that level of clarity to the stakeholders, to the board, to the executive team. And the more we understand where we're going, then you can start to really understand, well, where are we now and what are the necessary steps to that as is and to be. But the more we can clarify that vision, I think the more concrete we can be about, all right, this is how we're going to get there.
Mm.
So it's not, I say, as somebody who lives in a gray space all the time, when it comes to things like this, we're going to be as granular and black and white as we can get.
Nice. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
What's the name of your CEO? Let's give a shout out.
Yeah, Jay Prince. So I came into my organization back in July of 2024, and Jay joined us in October of 24. So we're relatively new. And there's been a lot of change within our organization since he's been there. I've been there.
What you said about clarity rings a whole bunch of bells for me in a couple of different places. The primary one, there's a book out there called Work of Leaders. I think it has 4 different authors, but one of the authors is a guy named Dr. Mark Scullard, who's one of the chief product people over at Wiley with Everything Disc, the psychometric disc, and then Susie Kukaman, who is, I think she leads all of the support elements of that organization. The book itself is really focused on what I call 3 operational behaviors. Vision, alignment, and execution are the 3. Yeah. So they've created an assessment on those 3 operational behaviors. And what's interesting about this, Richard, is we go in and we will assess a team, a leadership team or a project team on vision, alignment, and execution. What we find is that they're good at 2 of the 3, and they don't know they're not good at the 3rd one. And so the assessment really raises that up. It's like, oh, you're really good at ideation and the visioning component. And then you're very excited about that. And so you align really well, but then you're not really in the details and you don't have a good plan and you're not executing well. Or the reciprocal, this is a team that has a hyper excellent standard on execution, but they don't have any good new ideas. So it's more like incremental versus exponential. And so it's a really interesting assessment to do with a group to be able to come in and say, are you trying to innovate? Are you trying to transform? And then are you ready for it? Do you have the right mindset, the right skill, and the right competencies to be successful through it? I'm bringing all of that up because you used the word clarity. Vision has to be clarity. When vision for me is strategy, which is also saying, what does your desired end state look like? What does good look like there? And being clear about that so people know where they're going. That aligns with one of the 7 habits of highly successful people: begin with the end in mind. Absolutely. And so that kind of clarity for me is one of the keys of getting things going. But then clarity transitions from the visioning side into the alignment side. The people that we want to get on board, the people that we want to give that buy-in opportunity to that you were talking about earlier, do they have clarity in terms of what expectations are and what are they actually committing to? What are they buying into? And then, of course, clarity transitions into the execution side of it. Do we know what we're building? Do we know what standards we have to build into it? How will we know when we're successful? Can we predefine that and then operate in those standards? So I love the fact that Jay has prioritized clarity because I think it touches every aspect of moving forward in transformation overall.
And watching Jay, he's an expert with stakeholder engagement. And I feel like he really knows how to read a room. He knows what they want to, what they need to hear to get that level of buy-in. And so it's nice to watch, to have a front row seat and watch it in action. And even as far as a meeting last night, you heard board members saying they appreciated the clarity, they appreciated the details. I think that it reduces the amount of questions for sure, the more information you're providing. But I think that it becomes very effective and easier to get people to follow along when they know what to expect, right?
Yeah, again, I think it's easier to get people to commit, to buy in, to approve, your vision or whatever it is you're trying to do when clarity is really strong.
Right.
It is amazing in the work that we do here at iBridged, working with really what I would call hyper smart, hyper talented executives who don't have a good balance when it comes to vision alignment execution. When clarity isn't there, they're just excited about their idea, and then they wonder why it doesn't become a reality. Yeah.
I've seen that happen too. I think what's interesting is our current executive leadership team, we're all, I would say, we're experts in our fields of discipline, but a lot of us have varying degrees of this type of transformational change. And so it's going to be really great to watch us all grow and go through this together. For me, it might be brushing off some old muscle memory. Sure. And not having an experience of this type of transformation in senior living. So there's definitely a learning element for sure. But it'll be something that we're all going to grow and learn together.
Awesome. Awesome. Richard, I have to tell you, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And again, the scope and scale of the work at Bristol-Myers Squibb is phenomenal. Yeah. It's in some ways, it's as big as they get. And I think that our listening and viewing audiences are all going to get, at a minimum, some inspiration out of the challenges that you were faced with and complexity that you solved. I'm really interested, though, in how you got here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your, let's call it your origin story? How did you get to this place? What were the big things that shaped, who you are and how you show up as an executive?
Sure. So I would say it was an interesting and unexpected journey for sure. I started very young in my master's degree at age 23 in human resources back when the field was emerging, and youngest person in my class. And it was at a time when people were asked to go into HR. A lot of finance people or different areas of the business were in my classes. But I started the slow benefits and payroll specialist. And from there, I went to a private company. I was an HR manager for an international freight forwarding company for a period of time. I'm going to say my common thread is about relationship building. So at the time, we were doing our payroll through a company called Ceridian, which is a big player in HR. My person said, "Hey, we have an HR position open at Ceridian. You should apply." And I became the HR person for Ceridian Small Business for a number of years. That was my first, I call it my first sort of big boy job in HR, in that it was a publicly traded company. We were my first time working in a shared service model of HR with centers of excellence and that sort of thing. And then transitioned to the role at Bristol-Myers Squibb, which was life-changing on a number of levels, and did a lot of work for Bristol-Myers Squibb in Europe. So I was an HR director at one of their locations out there for a period of time, and making more relationships and connections, became the HR director of Europe for Mead Johnson Nutrition. So came from that, all of that transformation happening at Bristol-Myers Squibb, and being a central figure in that work helped me come over to the other side in August of 2009, worked at Mead Johnson for 3 years, HR director over 13 countries, and lots of other transformations that were happening within that. But to finish answering your question, when my 3-year assignment was over, I needed to come back to the US. And through relationships, I ended up with working for a company who made some of the ingredients that went into our infant formula, called DSM Nutritional Products, based in Columbia, Maryland. And I've been in Maryland ever since, working in hospital setting and always circling around healthcare is my passion.
Yep.
And just being, I'd say, a common thread, not only is relationship building, but also being open to new ideas and saying yes to things that a lot of people might not.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And again, just tying that back to the confidence that was
Yeah.
earned
Yeah.
through all of the transformation experiences that you've talked about, the fear factor goes down, the confidence goes up, and your willingness to say yes to things that are unknown or brand new or uncharted is a phenomenal takeaway from those experiences. You talked about the transition between US centric and based organizations to global. I'm curious, just off the top of my head here, really,
Mhm.
what, thinking about this through the lens of relationships, what was different about operating in Europe versus operating in the US?
Oof. Everything, right? So I think our whole structure of the employment relationship is completely different. We're more at will, we're more common law, there's civil law, there's employment contracts, there's work councils,
Hmm.
there's processes that you
Yeah.
have to go through. It mirrors a union environment here. But I think that people in Europe, for the most part, are not changing jobs as often as we do here. So relationship building there culturally is just so much more important because these are people you're going to be working with for such a long time. And you're working in a culture where, as part of the interview process, you're asking very personal things that we would never ask here in the US because it would be illegal, right?
Well, can you give me an example or
Yeah,
two of that?
sure. Your people are putting on their resumes in Europe, not only their picture, but they're telling us about their hobbies and interests.
Mhm.
And it would be fair game for us to explore more of those things that would tell us more about themselves,
Mhm.
things around their family size or political affiliation. There's a lot of things that would come up that for us in the US, the red lights would be blaring, where there it's just, yeah, okay, let's talk more about that.
Uh,
And so it was really rewiring my brain to turn off some of these things that you definitely don't do here in the US that you can do there, and even getting more intimately involved in understanding what's happening with people's health there. I
mm.
remember when I worked in Europe as the HR director, we had our employee health person who would go to people's houses to see how they were doing and then report back to me and tell me everything about their health.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Would be considered an invasion of privacy here.
But even that, the whole social structure, right? In America, I think we're very individualistic. And in Europe, they're
Mhm.
very collectivism. And to that regard, you're always making decisions about what benefits society as a whole rather than you personally.
I see. I
So
see.
just the whole mindset of how people think and what they grew up with is just so
Mhm.
different than
Mm.
what we experience here, that you really have to do a whole re-education of all the norms that we grew up with. A lot of them don't hold true over there. Really having the ability to understand that,
Mm.
really important.
Yeah, wow. That's a phenomenal insight in understanding some of the nuance around relationship building, which is tied to hundreds or thousands of years of cultural development there
Yeah,
in contrast to us. Super interesting.
yeah,
Let me ask you a couple of questions here that I like to have some fun with.
sure.
I hope you do too.
Yeah.
One of my favorite questions is, what's the best piece of advice you were given and didn't take?
Ooh. Best piece of advice I was given and didn't take. My dad. So
Yeah.
my dad was a scientist, right? He really loved science. He had master's degrees in physics, biology, chemistry, and special education. He was a teacher.
Wow.
And when I
Wow.
told him I wanted to be a psychology major, oh boy, that didn't go over well. And he said, Richard, you're going to be spending a lot of time in school and studying and money. What do you think you're going to be doing with that degree when you're done with it? And I think he wasn't wrong. You have to do something else with the psychology degree in terms of career options when you're done with that. And unless you're going to be a clinical psychologist, school psychologist, or something else, there's going to be more to come. So his advice that I didn't follow was pick something else. But I will say that when it was time for a higher education option, one of my best friends that I grew up with had been going to New York Institute of Technology, where I ended up with my master's degree at the time, and opened up the graduate book and showed me the HR program and said, "This is to do this for your living." That's what I did. I followed her advice.
That's interesting. And it's interesting to your dad's perspective, and to your point, it's not that he wasn't necessarily wrong or right, just that he had an interesting perspective, and maybe that it was incomplete. And that is, from my perspective, to say psychology coupled with human resources as a continuing academic career, but as a professional career, they pair very well together.
And I meet a lot of people that tell me the similar, "Oh, I was a psych major too." I'm not surprised. There's a lot of psychology in the work we do.
There's a parallel to this that's, I think of it as reverse polarized. I meet a lot of CHROs who have finance degrees for their undergrad.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And again, you wouldn't necessarily think that that's smart, but if you're going to operate in an executive role, you need to be able to speak the language of finance.
Sure.
Absolutely. And so financial controls and how you integrate those into the people side of your business.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense on the surface. I could easily see somebody saying, "No, that doesn't make sense." And in fact, it does make a lot of sense.
Exactly right. Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay. What advice would you give? I want to ask this, what advice would you give question from two different audiences?
Sure.
The first one is people that are coming up in HR.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about what does it really take to not only survive in HR as a career, but maybe thrive, what would that be? What would the one thing be that you would want to tell people who are up and coming?
That they need to keep an open mind about their entry point into an organization. I have met some young HR graduates that feel this, I hate to use the word, the sense of sort of entitlement of, I have this degree, so I should be at least a manager level of this.
Yeah.
No, you need to get some experience under your belt. And trying to get that entry point into an organization is really the key. And then once you're in, then you can start to build on what you're learning, what you start to understand, what are the things that you like more than something else. And I always tell people, don't be so specific about what you're looking for. Be more open-minded. And when you find your passion, and you will, then it's time to throw yourself into it.
Invest.
But don't, when you're starting off, I feel like that's why you see a lot of burnout early on, because you think this is the thing that you want to pursue. And then you throw 100% of yourself into it. And then maybe 8, 9, 10 years down the road, you do get a little burnt out. And maybe in the beginning of the career, if you try different things, try different hats, and see what fits you.
I love that advice, Richard. I love that advice. I'll tell you what's coming up for me while you were talking.
Yeah.
The antidote, the remedy to burnout is finding and doing work that feeds your soul. And I think about it as I don't want to get too esoteric, but a recycling of energy, if you will. You spend energy in the job that you do. And of course, you're going to get your needs met if we're thinking about Maslow's hierarchy as an example.
Sure.
You're going to get a paycheck and you're going to be able to pay your bills and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if the energy flow doesn't come back around and energize you, and the framing that I use for that is something that feeds your soul, right? Doing work that matters to you. If you don't have that second half, so it's not exclusively energy output, there's energetic recovery or return. When you find the work that does that for you, not only are you going to be more energized to do great work, you're going to have lofty goals, which is appropriate. You're going to be doing your best work. You're going to be creating value for your employer or your own business, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And then the financial rewards will come.
Sure.
But absent that, it's a short track to burnout.
Yes. I always say I'm really lucky, right? I started my HR career at a young age, and I still love what I do. And everybody that meets me will tell you that. But not only do I love the work that I do, I love the people that I work with. And so you have this looking forward to, I get to come back tomorrow and do this again. And on Sundays, I know a lot of people, oh, I have to go back to work. I get excited, like, oh, I get to go back to work and I get to see people that I enjoy being around and doing some really interesting things. And at the latter stages of my career, that's really been energizing and finding my fuel, right?
Yeah. That's excellent. And that's excellent advice for people coming up. The second audience of what piece of advice would you give to people who are already at your level? When you think back at your experiences and the things that you've learned, what is one thing that you might want to reiterate to someone to ensure their ongoing or continued success?
I would say to remember that there are other people's opinions matter, and that yours is not the only one.
Wow.
So I am working in a Quaker faith-based organization right now where everyone has a voice. I love that because you do solicit a lot of opinions, and you're talking about stakeholder engagement, going back to that again. In a senior community, your stakeholders are also the residents, the people that live there. So they're an important component of that. But to me, it's tapping into other voices and listening and soliciting other opinions, because they are going to think of things that you haven't thought of, and looking for that more well-rounded solution than proactively seeking other opinions is a key component of that. And I think as long as you're open to that, you're golden.
Great advice. Two things came up for me while you were talking about that, Richard. The first one is, obviously, we do a lot of executive level work, and we see ego interrupt that listening process that you're talking about, or even proactively seeking input from others. And sometimes we're the ones to catch it and re-raise the awareness for that executive. We've got to dial that down, and we've got to open up the doors and windows that let in the fresh perspectives. And so we do that, and that's often a relatively easy one to address. Every once in a while, of course, it's not, but just generally re-raising the awareness is enough for people to go, oh yeah, I've gotten too big for my britches, kind of thing. The second thing that came up goes back to again a previous segment where we were talking about vision, alignment, and execution. That comes from the book Work of Leaders. For me, the alignment component works in at least two primary directions. One is, as the driver of the change, you're trying to get people to adopt whatever the idea, the concept, the model, the methodology, the change, whatever that is. But if you're doing alignment, you're also listening and can be persuaded to change what you're doing or what you're working on or your strategy or even your vision. And even if we back up into the visioning process, if you do more of that on the front end, not only does it enrich whatever it is you're thinking about doing, not only does it enrich that, you've already softened the beachhead for buy-in going forward. So when people have a chance to weigh in, they're more likely to buy in. So I think that piece of advice, Richard, for your peer group is brilliant and really well said.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I think this wraps up another episode of the Transformational Leadership Podcast. Richard, I have enjoyed having you here today.
Yeah, it's been great.
You're really good, high quality content. I'm certain our viewers and listeners are going to enjoy the conversation. My gratitude for having you here today.
Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me. It's been fun.
My pleasure. We'll see you out there in the world. Before we pivot out, what's a good way for people to get in contact with you if they'd like to?
Yeah, my profile is on LinkedIn, so feel free to contact me.
Okay. And I've got a banner up on the screen here for the people that can see it, but LinkedIn sounds like a great place to connect with Richard if you'd like to. Richard, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Right. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
The Transformational Leadership Podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes vision, action, diagnostics, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to let us know in the comments. We'd love you to join the conversation and help us transform the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are transforming organizations, leaders, and teams. In the meantime, be sure to like, subscribe, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.